But there are some very, very practical things in life that I would like to remind us of. And as I say, not just us, but as you interact with others, there are things that from time to time we need to remind everybody of. We are not of this world, but we are in this world, and we need to live with an understanding of how life works and do what is needful to make sure that we do the best for ourselves, our families, our dependents, those who are looking to us. We are blessed to live in the nation of Canada. We are blessed to live in a country where the rule of law is upheld, and there are things that we can do and protections we have that many others in other places just don't have. And so that's good. We have the opportunity to really make life what it needs to be. There are some at various stages from youth to old age, and it doesn't really matter where we are. We just need to make sure that we live, act, prepare ourselves, do what is necessary to make a good life, the best life possible for ourselves. We are well aware of the fact that we need to occupy till he comes. That's what the scripture tells us. In other words, live a good and proper life until Jesus comes. We need to live as if we are going to live to 100. If you're 20 years old, live with a thought that you're going to be 100. Especially nowadays, that's much more likely than it was a few years ago. And so there are things we need to do to prepare ourselves to live that way. If we are blessed with children, we need to do everything in our power as parents to provide for our children. It means that when you earn money, you need to save money. 2 points of financial planning that we need to be extremely conscious of. Give 10%, save 10%. Give 10% and live on 80%. Now, the first 10%, not the second or the fifth, the first 10 goes to the Lord. Now, that's not just because we read about tithing in the Old Testament. It's just absolutely fantastic investing. That investment gives you the greatest returns you could imagine. Not just here, and it gives you returns here, but it also lays up for you treasures in heaven, where moth and rust don't corrupt and thieves don't break through and steal. I was speaking to someone last week, and it was interesting. He and a couple of friends, probably this was in the mid-60s, they bought some land, and they just held on to it. And 20 years later, they had bought this land for under $200,000, and 20 years later, just because of the way things go and how cities expand, they had an offer on that land for $70 million. And they didn't take that offer. They said, well, the government's going to get half of it, capital gains tax, and so they said we need more. And make a long story short, they ended up with an offer of $120 million for this piece of land. They didn't take it. They thought that they were smart enough to, work it themselves. Long story short, when it was finally sold, 10 years later, they got $20 million for it. Now listen, hey, 200,000, 20 mil, but they could have had 120. So what's the point? There are investments that we need to make. We might not have a lot, but we need to put something away and who knows what God will do. In this city, what is possible for most of us is that we can begin to save toward having a place of our own, a little condo, a little townhouse, a little whatever it is, a place that you own. Now, I don't know how many times Verona and I have seen this happen, and again, she is much better at this than I am. But there are times I'll see something, I'll say, oh, too much, too much. And she'll say, no, we need to get this. And just by virtue of where we live, in the city of Toronto, I was laughing early this year. There's a new stress test that the government has put in place that if you apply for a mortgage, they make sure that you are able to handle that mortgage if interest rates go up, whatever percentage. And so that slowed the market down for 30 days. Then last week, I'm hearing already this year, prices have gone up another 4.5% or 5%, and people are just begging for houses to sell. And the things that are selling in our neighborhood right now, things that you go, what? And the prices that they are asking are astronomical. So I want to encourage you, if you are able to get your stake in the ground, it doesn't have to be a mansion. It just has to be a place that has your name on it. And as time goes by, it's amazing what the Lord can do with that. So give 10%, save 10%. One of the reasons I like real estate is that it tends to appreciate faster than other investments that you have. But at the same time, you may not be able to do that. And so it's good to find a good financial planner who can help you with whatever little you may have to start to put something away. I was tremendously impressed many years ago. Brother Wallace and his family, he has never worked in a big, very high-paying job, but Brother Everton and Sister Janet, they determined early on when their children were born, they just started to put these pennies into a registered education savings plan. And you've put all your kids through school with that. Well, I guess it's only Jada left to get into the college. Ask Brother Everton about that. Something simple, but time is on your side if you start early. And no one would say, oh, well, it's because they are so rich and they have so much. No, they had foresight. They had foresight. They understood the power of compound interest. They understood that the government gives you something along with what you put in. It's free money. Take it, save it. And so he has been able to put his children through university. That, I take my hat off to you, my brother. That's phenomenal. And the day that he and Sister Janet went to see my dad and were talking about buying a little place, and I was nervous because I just get nervous about stuff like that. And they took that step, and I don't know how much that place is worth now from what you paid. Do whatever is in your power to save at least 10%, and if it is possible, put a little something down so you can get a place to call your own and have something for your future. And many have asked about insurance, and so I will mention again, life insurance is a very important thing to have in your portfolio. Learn a little bit about insurance, especially if you have children, you have a mortgage. There are different kinds of insurance, but there's one that's real cheap and will help you tremendously. It's called term insurance. Doesn't last your whole life. Might be 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever the case may be. But if you have a mortgage, for instance, the bank term insurance and bank mortgage insurance is usually way too expensive, but find yourself a good insurance agent. Say, I need to protect my mortgage, that if something happens and I die, my family isn't on the street. Especially whoever you may be as the head of your household, man or woman, you want to protect your children, those who are looking to you and depending on you. Buy insurance that will cover your mortgage, will cover the cost of your children's education, certainly will cover the cost of burying you. It's unfortunate at times when I'm dealing with families and those who have gone on have made no plan for their final arrangements, and now a family is there not just mourning the death of a loved one, but desperate to figure out how on earth are we going to pay for this. And these are things that we can easily do with cheap insurance. And again, youth is on your side. If you're a young person, buy a little whole life policy that you can afford, and as you go along, a time will come when just the interest on the investments through that policy are paying your premiums. But do something that will keep your family from suffering if the worst were to happen to you. One of the worst things that can happen is not that you die, but that you're disabled. It's kind of easy if someone dies. You bury them, you cry, and you just have to move on to the next step. But what destroys a lot of folks is not death, but disability. And so again, you need to take a look at disability insurance. What happens if I am unable to work and do what I'm doing, but I'm still here and I still have mouths to feed, I still have a family looking to me, and now I can't support them and I have become a burden? Not that they are complaining. I mean, sometimes accidents happen. It's not that these are bad people who bring accidents upon themselves, but now, whether you like it or not, you become a burden on your family because you are still here and all the costs of life have gone up drastically and there's nothing to help. And so, again, find a good insurance agent. Take all your coffee money and the stuff that you're throwing away and figure out, I need a good disability policy that will take care of me through my working years, certainly until I get to a point where I can think about pensions. So you need to find a good financial planner, and you need to find a good insurance agent. Sometimes they have both those certifications together. These are important things. You need, if you have children, to prepare for their education. RESPs are fantastic. RRSPs are fantastic. These are things that you can do to help yourself. And I know I've said it before, but make sure you write a will. Prince died a couple of years back. I don't know how many millions he had. No will. Aretha Franklin died the other day, $75 million estate. No will. Guess what's going to happen? Not what's going to happen. Guess what's happening right now? Doesn't matter how little you may think you have and how unimportant it is. Find a lawyer. I don't recommend just using the online stuff. When stuff is free, that's usually an indication of its value. You paid nothing, typically you get nothing. Find your lawyer and sit down and determine what you want to have happen with whatever assets you have. It is extremely important. And again, I say it because I have the privilege of working with many of you who are in your senior years, and wow, it's just good to know that there are those of you who are taking care of whatever may happen in the future, and I will be able to help your family get through this situation without hassle. Write a will. Especially if you have young children, you need to know who you want to take care of your children if you're not able to. You need to have somebody, and you need to talk to them and say, listen, whatever happens, I obviously hope and pray nothing happens, but if I happen to pass away, would you be willing to take care of my children? That's a big ask. That's a very important discussion to have, and you need to have that. Just ask yourself the question, what do you want to happen to your children if you're not there? It's worth having the conversation to say, listen, if I need your help, can I count on you? And then, by virtue of having appropriate insurance in place that can provide some funds to help with this, you may need someone to act as a trustee for your children until whatever age you choose when these funds can come to them. These are important things that we need to have in place. Things that we really need to have in place. Then you might need to update every 5 years or so, especially with young children. If your child is 13 today, well, in 5 years they'll be 18. They'll be an adult. Then there's a different situation. Now they don't need a caretaker, so to speak. They are legally adults. But what happens if you have real estate holdings? You may want to consider whether you get your child on title, so that if you pass away, they are listed on title as joint tenants, and so you don't have taxes to pay, inheritance taxes that steal your inheritance. These are very important things that we need to have in place.